What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Poker Coaching. We're going to continue with the 5:30 marathon run, the full tournament, every hand exposed. Let's jump into the first hand immediately. Say you're going hard, but nobody feels the same. Nice. Good shit.
All right, let's continue. I usually fold this one here.
It's the multi-way defending with position on one person that's really doing it for me here, you know?
Yeah, if it goes, I think it's when this player's not in. I think if it's this player raises and this player calls, like cutoff raises, small blind calls, I think this hand is a call. Or at least it's close enough to a call that I don't mind it. But I think when this player steps in and then you get this, like, now you just don't make hands that you can win with. Like, you have to make two pair. This just sucks now, so.
Okay.
All right, now we're heads up, which is cool, I guess. We limp, which is very good with most of our range. We stab, which is fine. So is checking. The two being paired in these scenarios is actually like fairly significantly. It depends on your strategy. If you're limping 100, which is fine, especially against like most people, then this two being paired is like pretty decent, and like you can just stab. If you're not limping 100, so if you're limping like 90, which is like I think a more GTO strategy. I think the GTO strategy is like limp 91 or VPIP 91 or something. If you're VPIpping like something like that, then obviously like which block do you fold? Well, obviously if you're going to fold anything, it's going to start with the deuces. So you end up folding the 2x block, and then because this player is out of position, they actually raise linearly, not polar. So they end up raising like, you know, you could think about like they raise a bunch of Broadway and a bunch of ace highs, and because you're going to call, right? So they end up being, when they check, they end up having like a lot of density around the deuce, and you end up having full density around the deuce, and so the deuce being paired ends up being like an asymmetric nuts that they have a lot that you don't have at all. So you end up checking here like more than people realize. But if you're limping 100, then it's not true, and then at least it's less true. And if you're limping and like if this, it's just close against a lot of people because they don't know how to take advantage of this situation as much as they should. But yeah. The way that it's supposed to work is you're supposed to check a bunch. Thoughts here?
Also, a nugget that stuck with me is defending 7x suited hands from the small blind versus button open, but obviously this is against the 3x.
Yeah.
So that might change things, but I also thought this is the guy that I remember thinking about this. Like I remember knowing like, oh, maybe 3x piece of information changes things, but at the same time, this guy had been only 3xing, so then he has the same range he normally does. But that could still mean, you know, I don't know how much that, if that doesn't matter at all, because it's like, it's about risk reward. It's not about, even if it's the full range, we still have to pay more to win less.
Yeah. So what's supposed to happen is like if he 3x's with his whole range, which is fine, but if he 3x's with his whole range, he should get a little bit tighter. Because he's investing more money, and so the weaker parts of his range will struggle to do that profitably, so he'll play a little bit tighter. If he's not playing tighter, you can 3-bet his range more because he's basically making the pot too big with too weak of a range. But the bottom of your flatting range still gets destroyed because the bottom of your flatting range is calling because it's getting good odds, and the odds got worse, right? That's just objectively true. He made it bigger, so the odds got worse. So the hands that are at the bottom of your flatting range will still have to fold, because they were barely profitable calls given the the improved odds they were getting, at a 2-point at a min raise, right? If you min raises, you're getting great odds, and Jack 7 suited is a call, yay. And then you 3x's and the odds got worse, and now this hand can't profitably call anymore.
Okay.
So yeah, this hand's gonna be out of folding this hand. It's a little tougher with the suited eights. The suited eights are really resilient combos in general. Like you see them VPipping in a lot of different scenarios. So the suited eights are a little harder, but the suited sevens aren't. The suited sevens are pretty fragile. Like as you go to different stack depths, like the suited sevens will come out. You test against different raise sizes, and the suited sevens come out relatively quickly. The suited eights are like very resilient. You can look at different positions, and the suited sevens won't be like are not VPipped as often, but the suited eights are just like really hard to fold sometimes. So yeah.
Okay.
So we got 30. So what are you thinking about here? Like, how do you think about this situation?
I believe that generally, when the turn is a card that the pre-flop raise has an advantage on, we either check, bet small, or bet really big, and nothing in between. That's what I seem to remember.
Okay. And you ended up checking here. So how do you bet here? Do you bet here at all? Are you checking like are you doing the strategy that you just suggested on this in this scenario?
Yeah, generally, but I do the strategy that I suggested a little bit more on boards that have a little bit more interaction with our range. So it would be I would like it more if it was like 10-8-6 king instead of jack 8-6 king. Then
Where you have like a nut combo.
yeah, just a few more of my combos that make like really strong hands. Then I would go more towards like the bet small or bet really big strategy.
I think the strategy that you outlined here is correct. So I think that like this will be like a bet small, blast at it, check type of scenario.
Oh, good.
I think that the ace would be like just a check range type of scenario. So it's like obviously this card, like the high cards are not as good as the low cards are, right? We prefer to see undercards. The ace is the worst high card when he checks back the flop, and I think you end up checking range there. I think, and here, yeah, for sure, I would have a betting range. And how do you think about your two pair combos? How do you organize your two pair combos here?
Well, I would like my two pair combos to make the king available the most if I want to really start like building a massive pot. So I think that's, for instance, like 6-8 would be the nutted hand to just like bet huge with.
Yeah, that's what most people think, and it doesn't
Mm.
work that way, which is that's why I kind of
Yeah,
wanted to,
interesting.
yeah, I kind of wanted to expose you a little bit, but only because this is a type of thinking that I think is very common at like high stakes or even mid stakes. So the just common thought process is like unblock the king, get value from it, yada yada yada, start blasting. And it works more like you want to think more about the check raise. So that's the way that I think about it. So if you were to check raise here, so if you check your two pair, presumably it's to check raise, right? You could obviously check call with it sometimes, but for the most part, we want to think about building a pot. And at that point, it becomes extraordinarily important that your opponent has a king. Is when you check raise them, because that's where all your value is
Mm.
going to come from, right? He checks back the flop, you check, he bets, and then you raise and he calls. Well, he probably doesn't have a jack, right? Probably doesn't have an eight, probably doesn't have a six. It's probably a pair of kings. So it's very important for your check raising range that you unblock a pair of kings. So you actually check raise a lot of 8-6. You check raise a lot of jack 6 or jack 8. And then you end up typically betting kings up.
Mm.
So you end up betting here with a lot of like
That makes a lot of sense.
king 8, king jack, king 6. So this
I
ends
see
up
what you're
filling.
saying, because now if he bets like 2200, it's going to be a bit awkward to check raise.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, and then calling also sucks. So both your options aren't very good. But if you have
Yeah,
8-6, it's just super clean, right? You just feel
yeah.
great about it. So yeah, this one ends up being pretty high. Like the king's up variations end up being pretty high frequency bets in a lot of these scenarios. In position checks back the king. We get to the river, and you ended up choosing pretty big bet sizing option. What do you think about when you choose this?
Well, so maybe a little bit sort of an exploit, but I tend to really like the line of when you're in the big blind and the pots get checked through twice to deploy really big bet sizes. Like I mean, I feel like my opponent's capped, so I want to bet big. I mean, that's the simplicity of it.
Yeah, I mean, like the nine is interesting just because the nine, like, at least introduces the possibility that it uncaps him a little bit. But that's the only reason why I asked. But I do think that like you can still use large bets. So I still think this is like a good answer. I think you also end up here using a lot of like block, like not necessarily with this hand, but like that. This kind of speaks to the thing we were talking about earlier, which is like in this scenario, if you get here and you have like I don't know a pair of eights. Okay, so your opponent checks back the flop, so they don't have a pair of jacks. Then they check back the turn, so they don't have a pair of kings. A nine is actually like a reasonable way for them to bet the flop. So if they have 9-10, they'll probably bet the flop at the turn. If they have queen 9, they'll probably bet the flop at the turn. They don't have king 9. 9-7 bets the flop at the turn a lot. So like they could have ace 9, right? Sure. Like that's the 9 that they could have is ace 9. But they don't have a lot of nines. Okay, so like they don't have a lot of nines, they don't have a lot of kings, and they don't have a lot of jacks. So if you want to bet an 8, that's not unreasonable, right? Like I know that some people look at this and like, I would never do that. Well, like it's fine. Like it's fine to bet a pair of eights. The other guy's gonna have a pair of sixes. He's gonna have pocket fives, fours. He's got a lot of ace high, like ace queen specifically, ace 10. It's fine to block with a pair of eights, right? But then of course, like it's fine to think about like some of the two pair maybe that has a pair of eights from like a duplicative perspective. So like jack 8 and betting like really small, king 8 and betting really small. I think 9-8 is a really really clever hand to bet really small with because if you want to bet bigger with two pair, a lot of the EV is actually going to come from a pair of nines once you start betting larger. So I think the two pair that has an 8 in it is kind of like how you block a lot. Like this could have blocked too. But again, like you have two pairing, like I want to win a big pot, and it's like yeah, well, and then when you block, you end up being really dense, a pair of eights, and like it's really hard to do something about it. Like you really have to be thoughtful.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of tying some of these hands together, right? Because we
Yeah,
talked about
yeah.
this idea before. So this is fine. Like this is like GTO. It's a great answer. It's just not the only answer. And so like
Mhm.
you should block here sometimes too.
Yeah, I like it. That's interesting.
Okay, this looks pretty good. Yeah, this is fine. It's close, for sure. Okay, so we are using like a lot of larger bets now, which is good. I'm not criticizing. It's just definitely using a lot of them. So was this close for you? How do you think about the flop here?
Not really. I feel like I need something around like hearts, diamonds, or a single diamond in my hands, and just like fold the clubs and the spades.
I think this is close. It might not. You might be right, but I think this is pretty close. I don't know. It's weird one because obviously like you 3x is pre-flop. I think yeah, I just think it's really close.
Yeah.
All right, so we have 20 bigs. We open ace jack. How do you think about? Are we using a lot of small bets here? Do we use large bets here?
Well, I used to bet pretty small, but then I just also I also sort of learned through you. Well, I'm not saying that if I make a mistake, it's your fault, but you made me aware of the fact that even if we're like sub 20 big blinds, if boards are draw heavy, like let's say king 7-6 with a flush draw or whatever, that it's still good that we still have some larger percent bets. But I feel like on this board I don't need to bet large because they don't have the nuts ever. Well, that could be a reason to bet big actually.
That would be yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of funny, but that's kind of funny. I caught myself there. But I feel there's also small betting on this board.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some small betting on this board, 100%. So this was like not
But
stupid.
I will say a huge problem is bet folding this hand. Like if I'm gonna fold this fucking hand, then I shouldn't be betting it.
Well, this is awkward, right? So, like, first of all, you have 20 bigs, which makes this kind of scenario a little bit annoying because you have a decent board for you, but a 20 bigs, like this player ends up three betting all of the ace high hands. So the boards that like Jack 10-9, 10-9-8, like 10-9-7, these boards end up being really good, like really good for the big blind because the big blind ends up being stripped of the top part of the range. Like if you think about it as a grid, the top part of the ace high block is missing, and like the whole bottom part is missing. So they end up being kind of like much more dense the middling part.
Mm.
So like these boards end up having like some check on them, like frequently, like not I don't know, not all the time. I'd have to look at this one to know exactly, but a lot of these middling boards end up having some check percentage on them because they're harder to bet. This hand still ends up betting a bunch. Like you get a lot of value from betting this hand. You can bet even though your hand performs really badly versus raised. You can still bet as long as you're going to get called a lot, and get called by worse a lot. So, which I think is obviously true, right? So it's like this is not stupid to bet, but it probably mixes to check because you have problems with betting this hand, as you pointed out, right? And then you get raised, and unfortunately, this hand is going to be like really sensitive to like exactly how this raising range is shaped and exactly the odds you're getting. Like if they make it really big, this is pretty big already. This hand against bigger sizes, like people pure fold, and if he like makes it, this is not necessarily the sizing he's supposed to make it, which makes it harder. Like I think that the most commonly chosen sizing here is actually like 2600 because
Hmm.
this player doesn't need to make it very big to get their stack in, right?
Yeah.
And when you have like a hand like you have, you're kind of indifferent against small check raises. And then when you have like a combo draw hand and you have a lot of them, like then you
Left and
never fold ever. So like if you have a pair plus a 10, you always call. If you have a pair plus a king, you basically always call. If you have a pair plus a flush draw, you always call. If you have a combo draw with like a flush draw with a 10 in it, you always call. So like this sizing's I think a little bit too big. In addition to that, like you can just jam all of your whole queen X block. Like you can just drop it in with like queen 8 if you want. It's fine. So I think this player's supposed to use smaller check raises here, I think. And so yeah, this is a little bit large. I think against this larger size, I think you could fold. I think
Mm.
this is actually okay. But I think if he makes it like a more commonly chosen size, then I think you have to call. So, but I think this is like really close.
Okay. Oh, that's good to hear. I looked at it. I was like, ooh.
Yeah, no, it's really one of the close spots. It's really sensitive, I think, to bet sizing and stuff.
Okay.
That's one of the things when people also like when people look up hands or something, like like if you're for people that are like fact checking this, like as because I know some of the people that watch this video on YouTube, I know some of them actually like to do that. Like a lot of people will bring up like a solver and they'll be like, oh, like this line you should have done this, or like this line you should have done that, and like the way to use a solver to like check a line is to like look at what you should do against like this against a small check raise size, like a medium check raise size, and a big check raise size, and see like how things shape because or how they change. Because if it's really close, or if it starts to behave differently, that means that the fold or the call is not very resilient, right? And so you can start to see why like maybe Lex or I like would go in a certain direction, and a solver might actually like think it's reasonable. And the same thing is true if you look up one hand. Uh, like you might look up Queen Jack 9, for example, and you might get an output of X. But then if you look up Queen Jack 10 or like Jack 10 8 or something, which like Jack 10 8 would look very similar to this board in terms of its range construction. Like the one gapper, etc. And Jack 10 8 with 2 diamonds and 1 spade, right? Like that's gonna be very similar to Queen Jack 9 with 2 diamonds, 1 spade. And if Jack 10 8 behaves very differently than Queen Jack 9, maybe the strategy you're seeing is not very resilient. So you want to check similar boards. You don't want to just look at like one spot. You want to look at like you want to cluster basically. You want to look at like a cluster of boards that are similar to this one. You want to look at a cluster of raise sizes and that are similar to this one, and like use that to try to figure out what you should do, because otherwise you can just basically you're going to be a victim of basically solutions that are overfit, like perfect solutions for this one spot that don't actually apply broadly speaking. And as a human, you can't memorize all the different spots. Like, I mean, if you can, then you don't need to watch our YouTube videos. So you can't memorize all the spots. So what you need to do is try to build like an understanding of how these spots work, generally speaking. And to do that, you really need to cluster scenarios.
Yeah, and I think also when you cluster, the advantage is if you see that the strategy significantly changes when it's like Jack 10 8, then it also means that the strategy that you thought was like pure or this is the way is just indifferent more.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. So this guy keeps 3xing. Like this is pretty close pre-flop. He's probably tired of him though. So, but like this is close. I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't know.
Okay, I'm pure defending that. So I mean, like like just bang on the same thing as much as you want, because like to me this is just like, okay, I'm not even looking like a pure defended.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I folded Jack 7 off, so like obviously I'm aware of the difference, but I just thought like hands like 6 8, just because the cards are so much closer together.
Yeah, a lot of your range is really sensitive to deteriorating odds. Is just like the bottom line. I mean, like a lot of the range is going to be sensitive to deteriorating odds. And the thing that's annoying is it affects a large number of combos all at once, or affects, and that's because you have so many combos in the big blind range that are offsuit specifically that don't make very much money when they call, but they make just enough. And there's a bunch of hands that make just enough. And so if your opponent makes it like much bigger, they all come out. It's like this massive sea change in your range, which is annoying because you'd like it to be just like a small couple tweaks, and it's just not. So yeah.
Okay.
This is obviously standard. That's kind of cool.
It's kind of, I feel, well, it's actually not kind of fucked because it makes my 4x a lot stronger.
I think this is like a decent way to go, where you like represent the 4x block. I think this is like pretty reasonable.
Okay.
I would check.
No.
So why don't you walk me through like how you think this works, looking at it when you say no?
Well, I mean, he has like, I would say he has like a pretty clear advantage at this point. I mean, I'm not check raising ace highs very often. He's floating ace highs a lot. He has the overpairs, and if we disregard the ace x, he has a bunch of sixes. I mean, mostly coming from only coming from the suited block, right? He barely has any offsuited sixes. I think at this size, like only king 6 mixes probably, and so I still have the advantage on the sixes, obviously, but the fact that there's 3 on board just cuts in my combos really hard. Like fuck. I mean, I feel like if I'm gonna bet 21k, then I might as well just rip it. Like I don't think 21k is his size. I think that we maybe block super small, check, or bet insanely big.
Yeah. So how do I think about this? Right. So for me, it just like I try to go as simple as possible. It's either you have. So I say go as simple as possible, and it's like I'm struggling to give you an answer. But so when I say as simple as possible, I just look at the board and like, what do I have, right? So you check raise the flop and barrel small on the turn. So you can have a pair of fours. If you have a pair of fours, I think you just check the river. I
Yeah.
think that you like I just don't think that bets. So that's a pair of fours. I think it's possible that you have ace jack. I think that's possible. I think that like maybe like I don't think it's stupid to check raise ace jack or ace queen on this board. So like to the extent that you flat ace queen, I don't think those are stupid check raises, and I think that like blocking the turn is not stupid either.
Yeah.
Like they're possibilities. I'm not saying they're super likely, but they're possibilities. I think if you have like an ace five or something, you shouldn't barrel the turn. So if you check raise like a 3 to a straight type ace, I don't think that that should barrel. Maybe if you have like ace five of diamonds or something, that can barrel sometimes. So that's the other part of your range. I don't think it's like a very big, meaningful part of your range, but it's it's there. That part of your range may still want to check because you block where the value is going to come from, which would be like presumably an ace. But and like I don't know, I guess that's the rest of it's like pocket nines. But yeah, like maybe that part of your range might want to bet like 16,000 if you had it. And then the only other part of your range is a six, and that jams. So you have a four, which doesn't bet, in my opinion. I don't think it blocks either. So you have a four, which doesn't block. You have an ace, which maybe bets 16,000, which I don't think is a very significant part of your range at all. And then you have a six, which jams. So this bet, I think, doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't make, yeah, just seeing it, I felt like, I mean, I feel like this should be a jam or a check in that sense.
yeah, I agree.
Because we kind of want we kind of want to protect our the ace jack that we could have. We kind of want to put in to protect our 4x, right?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, potentially. And I think that the six, the same thing. Like you can jam the six here, but I think you can also just check the six. And it's not even like some people like when you say protect the four, it's also just because like if it looks like you have a four, this guy will put a bunch of money in against a four, right?
Mhm.
Like if if he reads, if he can hand read, and it's like, oh, like he check raised the flop, he blocked the turn, he checks the river. That's a behavior that's very much in line with a pair of fours. So that's probably what this guy has. Oh, look, I have a pair of fives. I beat a pair of fours. Maybe I'll bet. Like that's like that's kind of how we want this to go. And so you end up getting a lot of investment from your opponent if you're telling him that you have a pair of fours, right? You'll get a lot of investment from all the stuff that beats a pair of fours, which happens to be everything, and you'll get a lot of investment from bluffs because a pair of fours is in a very strong hand, right? So checking is a viable way to win a big pot, or so let me rephrase. Checking is a viable way to get a lot of investment from your opponent when you have trip sixes. Sorry, when you have quads. So checking is pretty good,
Yeah.
and you can check and then like he bets and then you jam, or you could just be like fuck it and then just jam, just jam yourself. But yeah, I just don't think this bet size exists.
Yeah,
Really.
it's yeah. Yeah, exactly. I also feel like it's just almost screams that. Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. All right, man.
All right, brother.
Yeah, thanks a lot again.
Yeah, no worries. And then we'll pick this up next time.
I really hope you guys are learning a lot from these videos, especially the button and the big blind are two of the most important situations to study because you're going to play most hands from there. You're going to be in the most marginal positions. Of course, if you have any questions, drop them down below. Me or BBC will get back to you. If you appreciate the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.